Orphan drugs in India and challenges.
To get latest updates in pharmacy, subscribe to PharmaTutor's YouTube channel. Click on bell icon and don't miss our videos.
Orphan drugs are medicinal products intended for diagnosis, prevention, or treatment of life-threatening or very serious diseases or disorders that are rare. In USA, the Orphan Drug Act was passed in 1983 to give drug companies incentives to develop treatments for rare diseases. India does not have laws on orphan drugs, though CDSCO defined orphan drugs as those intended to treat a condition which affects fewer than 200,000 people. It is estimated that globally around 6,000 to 8,000 rare diseases exist, with new rare diseases being reported in the medical literature regularly. However, 80% of all rare disease patients are affected by approximately 350 rare diseases. India, like many other developing countries, currently has no standard definition of rare diseases and data on prevalence. Since there is no epidemiological data, there are no figures on burden of rare diseases and morbidity and mortality associated with them. If we apply the international estimate of 6% to 8% of population being affected by rare diseases, to India, we have between 72 to 96 million people affected by rare diseases in the country, which is a significant number. However, this is at best a general estimate, and India will need to arrive at its own estimate and definition of rare diseases, derived chiefly from prevalence data, which is currently lacking. So far only about 450 rare diseases have been recorded in India from tertiary care hospitals. The most common rare diseases include hemophilia, thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, and primary immunodeficiency in children, autoimmune diseases, lysosomal storage disorders such as Pompe disease, Hirschsprung disease, Gaucher's disease, cystic fibrosis, hemangiomas, and certain forms of muscular dystrophies. Lack of epidemiological data. Data on how many people suffer from different rare diseases in India is lacking. The cases identified so far have been diagnosed at tertiary hospitals. The lack of epidemiological data on incidence and prevalence of rare diseases impedes understanding of the extent of the burden of rare diseases and development of a definition. Diagnosis of rare diseases. Diagnosis of a rare condition may take up to several years, owing to difficulty in diagnostic modalities and lack of awareness among doctors. For many rare diseases, no diagnostic method exists, or diagnostic facilities are unavailable. Traditional genetic testing can only address a few genes at a time. As a result, physicians must often provide their best guess on which genes to investigate. If the test is negative, further testing will be required, which is an expensive and time-consuming process. There is a lack of awareness about rare diseases in general public as well as in the medical profession. According to a recent report, it takes patients in United States, US, an average of 7.6 years, and patients in United Kingdom, UK, an average of 5.6 years to receive an accurate diagnosis, typically involving as many as 8 physicians. In addition, 2 to 3 misdiagnoses are typical before arriving at a final diagnosis. Challenges in research and development. A fundamental challenge in research and development for the majority of rare diseases is that there is relatively little known about the pathophysiology or the natural history of these diseases. Rare diseases are difficult to research upon as the patient pool is very small, and it often results in inadequate clinical experience. Therefore, the clinical explanation of rare diseases may be skewed or partial. The challenge becomes even greater as rare diseases are chronic in nature, where long-term follow-up is particularly important. As a result, rare diseases lack published data on long-term treatment outcomes and are often incompletely characterized. This makes it necessary to explore international and regional collaborations for research, collaborations with the physicians who work on any rare disease and with patient groups and families dealing with the consequences of these disorders. Challenges in treatment. Unavailability of treatment. Availability and access to medicines are important to reduce morbidity and mortality associated with rare diseases. Despite progress in recent years, effective or safe treatment is not available for most of the rare diseases. Hence, even when a correct diagnosis is made, there may not be an available therapy to treat the rare disease. There are between 7,000 to 8,000 rare diseases, but less than 300 have therapies available to treat them. About 95% rare diseases have no approved treatment and less than 1 in 10 patients receive disease-specific treatment. Where drugs are available, they are prohibitively expensive, placing immense strain on resources of families, health systems, and donor agencies alike. Prohibitive cost of treatment. At present, very few pharmaceutical companies are manufacturing drugs for rare diseases globally, and there are no domestic manufacturers in India. Due to the high cost, the government has not been able to provide these drugs for free. It is estimated that for a child weighing 10 kilograms, the annual cost of treatment for some rare diseases may vary from Rs 18 lakhs to 1 crore 70 lakhs. Further, the methodology for evaluating treatment of rare diseases is often still in experimental phase, impeding assessment of clinical relevance and cost effectiveness. Several countries have, through legislation like Orphan Drug Act, ODA, provided incentives to drug manufacturers to encourage them to manufacture drugs for rare diseases. The most powerful incentive for drug manufacturers is the grant of 7 to 10 years of exclusive marketing rights, including protection from imports, if a drug gets orphan drug status. This means that pharmaceutical companies can price their drugs without fear of competition. This has changed the nature of drug development. The number of requests for orphan drug designation has quadrupled since 2000. The result has been a boom in drug sales and profits. In fact, almost a third of drugs for rare diseases now exceed £1 billion in annual sales. The global orphan drugs market is expected to reach £144 billion by 2020, and account for 19% of total branded prescription drug sales. The average price of a drug for rare diseases exceeds $100,000 a year. Over the years, many drugs have won orphan drug status even if they are not new or represent a scientific breakthrough. An inexpensive off-patent drug approved by the FDA for one condition, but widely prescribed as an off-label treatment for a rare disease, can be transformed into a big moneymaker. The accompanying 7 to 10 years of monopoly status can mean large price hikes for a drug that was already in wide use. For instance, older medicines for rare diseases like imatinib used to treat chronic myeloid leukemia can cost over $100,000 a year in developed countries. In India, public health safeguards in the patent law that restrict evergreening patents have allowed Indian generic manufacturers to manufacture and supply this drug at far lower prices. The exorbitant prices of drugs for rare diseases has led to concerns even in the developed countries about maintaining sustainability of the rare diseases funding/reimbursement programs. Skyscraping pricing, increasing opportunities. Every time, high drug prices are not due to patent of medicines. Just remember infamous Martin Shkreli, who purchased Turing Pharmaceuticals, which is involved in production of Daraprim, and subsequently hiked price of medicine by 5,500%. The world took note on that price hike. It became a high controversy when Turing raised the price of a dose of Daraprim in the US market from $13.50 to $750. Patients whose liver does not produce one of the two primary bile acids and results in a critical condition that causes neurological problems, seizures, and even dementia. For the past half-century, it was relatively easy to treat such patients at a cost of €500 per annum by using Chenofoc, chenodioxycholic acid, an off-label drug. In 2008, Leadiant acquired the rights to Chenofoc, and developed its own version, known as CDSCO Leadiant. Then, very smartly in 2014, it got the EU to classify its version as an orphan drug, giving Leadiant exclusive marketing rights for 10 years. Immediately thereafter, it jacked up the price of CDSCO Leadiant to about €150,000 for a year's treatment. Sidan, which helps launch startups focused on orphan drug development, have decided to steer clear of them. That strategy is beginning to pay off. The company has successfully spun out 3 startups. The first of these, Vetus, launched in January 2015 to develop a treatment for Niemann-Pick type C, a rare lysosomal storage disorder, using sugar molecules called cyclodextrins. It was acquired by Sucompo Pharmaceuticals for $200 million last April 2017. India does not have laws on orphan drugs as yet, but the draft rules released by the Health Ministry on a regulatory framework for clinical trials. Higher numbers of patients from India should make the pharma companies to invest more in orphan drugs. So far, USA has developed over 200 drugs and biological products to treat orphan diseases since Orphan Drugs Act passed.